When we talk about an overweight or obese dog, what do we actually mean?
Is a disease where body fat, adipose tissue, has been stored to the point that it's now causing a detrimental effect on that individual. For most pet owners, they just have no idea what normal looks like, and we've kind of lost what normal looks like in many different breeds. From a pet owner's point of view, it's a kind of a slow burn because they can have a dog in an overweight condition for quite a while and nothing bad seems to happen. And then all of a sudden, something bad happens. You don't necessarily realize the impact of the weight until it's gone. We end up with individuals with quite poor quality of life often. Most of us would recognize with those severe cases that they really do have a compromised welfare and compromised quality of life. But all of those things can be helped, which is a good thing.
Welcome to the DAFY Podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert.
Georgia, welcome to the DAFY Podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to get going.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. So the first question for you, Georgia, is, why are you so passionate about dog nutrition? What's your background?
So I think this was kind of a slow burn in terms of how I got interested in nutrition. I've kind of done a little bit of all of it. I've been a veterinary nurse since 2004. I qualified, and I think each part of my job role, nutrition has always been there in the background. So starting as a newly qualified nurse, talking to owners about feeding, just life stage feeding to begin with, then moving on to weight clinics, as many people do, and then kind of moving on from that to being a head nurse of a branch practice and really getting the opportunity to spend a lot more time talking to owners about nutrition. And I think the love was born there, and I've thankfully been able to follow that really into a role that I currently am in, where I get to specialize in nutrition and obesity care, which I feel incredibly lucky to be able to do. And I think it's because through food we can just do so much. And from a pet owner's point of view, this is one of the major places that they get to influence their pet's health. So that's massively powerful to me. So I think nutrition is beneath everything. Get the nutrition right and we're doing well always. How could it not be more exciting than that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you said so powerful. And I think it's that powerful to the point that you decided to also write a wonderful book about it. Tell us a little bit about this book, please, because I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I am so proud of that. And I must give a shout out to the editors who also helped me hugely to produce that. But the whole point of that book was to have an easy resource in practice, grab it from the shelf. I've got this patient in front of me. It's got some sort of nutritional need, or I'm having a nutritional conversation. Where's the information that I need? Where's the evidence? Where isn't the evidence? And it was that sort of very quick kind of the best bits of information that you need, because we haven't always got hours to talk to pet owners. So it's about giving them those key pieces of information. Many nutrition books are huge and you have to wade your way through pages and pages and pages to get at the actual information that you're looking for. So this very much was bringing it back to the practicalities of having these conversations.
Yeah, and I absolutely love it because it's very much like an evidence-based kind of like science back. You refer so many times on, the different studies out there. And I feel like I'm not in practice. I have a master in, dog and cat nutrition, but there are a lot of nutritionists as well out there. I think it could be an incredibly useful resource to have, because again, it comes from someone with your background and you work at the University of Liverpool, right? So you had up
Yes.
the obesity clinic there, and it's just in general nutrition, I think it's just a fantastic resource to have for anyone that works in this industry.
No, well, thank you. And I really hope that is the case. And certainly since it was released, that's very much been the feedback from people who have read it and want to use it. I think the other good thing with it is that it has owner associated resources, so people can print fact sheets that are, again, all evidence based if owners want that evidence. But certainly from a sort of professional point of view, making those recommendations and just understanding what do we know, what don't we know, where are the gaps, what maybe is safe, what maybe we don't have enough safety to recommend just yet, sort of picking apart all of that. I thought, well, I can spend the time doing that and then summarize it in these chapters. So yeah,
Yes.
very, very pleased with it.
Yes. No, I absolutely love it. And just for everyone, it can be found on Amazon as well. That's where I bought mine from, I think. Yeah. So yeah, super, super useful. And today we're talking about a topic that is very, very close to your heart. Obviously, you're dedicating pretty much your career to this, which is amazing. And we're talking about something that is very common right now, especially in cats and dogs, which is obesity as a subject. So can you tell us, I mean, everyone will know what an obese and overweight dog is, right? Like that's what we think straight away. Is, okay, my dog is put a little bit of weight on. But from your perspective, when we talk about an overweight or obese dog, what do we actually mean?
So what we're really talking about and describing is a disease where body fat, adipose tissue, has been stored to the point that it's now causing a detrimental effect on that individual. So that might be in a large way in terms of mobility issues, can't walk as far, can't jump as they used to, but it can also be on a much lower level, sort of at a metabolic level, at a cellular level, insulin resistance, that sort of thing. So either obviously or not obviously, I guess, to the pet owner's point of view, that excess adipose tissue is going to be having an effect. And I think I'm so interested in this area is because we can absolutely change that. We can really do something about that. Now, it's not simple and straightforward, but we do have good strategies available to us at the moment to reverse those things. But it is, of course, much more complicated than that, but it is possible. And I think because it's possible, that's a very powerful thing that we get to be involved with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And realistically, based on your experience and what you see and what you hear from the kind of studies out there, how many pets are really overweight or obese right now?
So the prevalence studies depends where you are in the world, depends how the studies have been conducted, whether they're owner reported, veterinary reported, whether they've been, there's lots of different ones. Around 60% is probably the sort of rough estimate across all of them. Cats and dogs, there will be some differences between countries. The UK and the US are very similar. Some of the prevalence studies that have been done in Europe, they're a bit lower, some more like 30 or 40%. But I think in, a lot of sort of westernized countries, I think we can probably assume we're looking at least half of all cats and dogs have a degree of overweight or obesity.
Yeah. And the first follow-up question to that is, as a dog owner, how do I know that my dog is overweight? Because I think that's sometimes part of the problem, isn't it? Like it's people don't realize in a way. So how do I know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think many pet owners do know initially, or they might think that it's milder than it actually is. And in many ways, we can't really blame them for that. So the resources that pet owners have to hand are what they see on the TV, on social media, in magazines, and so on. But because obesity is so widespread and we are seeing images, at these big dog shows of the best of their breed and so on, still having a degree of overweight or obesity, for most pet owners, they just have no idea what normal looks like. And we've kind of lost what normal looks like in many different breeds. In terms of how we actually tell, body condition scoring is the major way that we would tell whether a cat or a dog is carrying more body fat than they need or that they should be carrying. We recommend, and the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, WSAVA, also recommends to use a 9-point scale. There are other scales available, but the 9-point scale is at least validated against body compositions of individual cats and dogs. So although there is a certain amount of subjectivity, it is currently the best system that we have that's easily accessible, that's quick and relatively easy to perform in practice. There are other ways of doing it with various scanners and things, but for the most part, that's not practical. So from a communication point of view for us to an owner, it's reframing for them what normal should look like and what it should feel like, not only for an individual dog or cat, but within their breed. You know, Labradors, for instance, we see so many Labradors in a overweight or obese condition. Very, very hard for an owner to recognize that their dog isn't normal. And it can be very challenging to hear that from us as professionals. I think the other thing is that weight has been stigmatized for a very, very long time in terms of who's to blame, whose fault it is, and so on. And so owners are not going to want to feel and pursue the feelings and thoughts that they're doing something wrong, that they've got it wrong as such. And so it's not information that they're necessarily going to be looking for. And it's why these conversations should be held in an empathetic way, because there is a lot of emotion attached here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's a delicate conversation to have, I think, from a vet perspective. But also it's just really, really relevant because, we do now know that it is a disease, and, there are, other like compound effects that are happening in the body as a result of them being overweight, even if it's never really been seen as it's a disease, right? What are these compound effects of a dog being overweight for a long amount of time that you see?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the duration and the severity of the obesity. So we can recognize that there are some dogs and cats that, for the most part, can carry some excess weight but appear fairly normal. And they can perform normal activities, and they can, do natural behaviors, that sort of thing. However, when you get those individuals to lose weight, suddenly they are bigger, brighter, faster. You don't necessarily realize the impact of the weight until it's gone. It's a cellular level, and particularly, well, dogs and cats, actually. We think about it more in cats, but it does happen with dogs also. The body fat itself is an active endocrine tissue. It releases hormones known as adipokines, and these adipokines, they're detrimental. They do bad things, and one of the bad things that they do is cause insulin resistance. So we do see obesity-associated diabetes in both dogs and cats. Even though we think about it more in cats, it does happen in dogs also. So from a pet owner's point of view, it's a kind of a slow burn, because they can have a dog in an overweight condition for quite a while and nothing bad seems to happen. And then all of a sudden, something bad happens. Maybe their cruciate ligament goes and they're in needing quite urgent surgery because of the pain that that dog's in. And they've just not anticipated something like that happening. And so when it goes on for years and they remain in an overweight condition, that is most likely to lead to an obese condition at that point. And at that point, we start getting respiratory compromise. So they just can't breathe so well. Everything is squashed and constricted. If it's a brachycephalic breed, then they're really going to start struggling with their breathing. They do anyway. And then add obesity to that. It's sort of even worse situation. And kind of all areas of the body, every joint is going to be carrying a load that it's not designed to carry, and so it's going to be under more stress and inflammation as a result of it. And one of the other things that the adipokines do that come from the body fat itself is cause inflammation. So if you think about that joint that's already carrying a weight that it's not designed to, caused inflammation because of that, and then you add the inflammatory adipokines on top of that, we get sore, painful joints in these individuals. If we've got osteoarthritis, it's exacerbated even more. So with all body systems kind of being affected and increased risks of things like cancers, surgical risk, anesthetic risk, we end up with individuals with quite poor quality of life often. And again, these thoughts are quite challenging for a pet owner. They don't want to think that their dog or cat is, not having a good time in their life. And yet, I think most of us would recognize with those severe cases that they really do have a compromised welfare and compromised quality of life. But all of those things can be helped, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's all about the prevention, isn't it? And I see that a lot with, as well, like, people that decide to go and start a homemade diet, and it's just not the diet not being complete and balanced, very similar to like obesity, is you don't see the impact of that straight away. You will see that when they're a lot older, and then it's like really difficult to reverse that has been done for like many years. So yeah, it's tough, but that's kind of why these conversations are really important, and these, it's spreading awareness about it is really important. Why do you think dogs are overweight? Like, what is happening? Because 60% is a huge number, isn't it? So what is the root cause of dogs being overweight?
So there's been lots of people looking into this, and it was a study from last year, I believe, that actually one of the findings was it's actually the pet's own motivation. It's their food-seeking behaviors that drives this overconsumption. Now, how obesity occurs is a massively complex topic, and it will be individual and different for every single patient, the reasons that came about. Ultimately, though, we live in a day and age where food is easily accessible. High calorie foods are pretty cheap. They call it an obesogenic environment because it really is just very, very easy to overconsume and to not know when to stop. So we tend to, as humans, we tend to prefer foods that don't give us a lot of fiber, for instance, that just taste really good, that they don't trigger our satiety centers in terms of feeling full. And so we overeat them because it feels really good to do so. And then, of course, with our pets living with us with such close relationships, a lot of this gets passed on. And so we can think about things like the way that we celebrate with food. Maybe it's a nice day and we have a barbecue. Maybe it's a birthday, maybe it's Christmas. If there's a dog in that house, they are going to be involved in that too. And yet, left to their own devices, they wouldn't necessarily be having that food under normal circumstances, but it's because they live with us, and we are sort of subjecting ourselves to this sort of food environment. So it's very, very easy. And then I think the other side of that, because we always talk about diet and exercise, is that the exercise portion is always overestimated. The actual benefit in terms of weight loss that you get through exercise is really minimal. It's about 5%, if that. And that's for an individual who's drastically increasing their activity levels. So you'd have to go probably a third more in terms of activity level to make any dent at all if you're not changing the diet. So it's not to say that exercise isn't important. It's vitally important. But from a weight loss or a weight maintenance point of view, it's not the big thing. The food is the big thing. And so what many pet owners perceive is this, oh, I'll just take him for an extra long walk, it'll be fine. It never is, because the calories take a very long time to burn and very little time to consume.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think, yeah. And I think another thing is that it's just love, isn't it? Like food, dog and cats are just being like looked after in a way compared to maybe like 30 years ago, where we just see them as part of the family. And so, yeah, it's really, really tough. What about dog food? So another thing I hear all the time is, from dog owners is, I just feed what's at the back of the packet. There is a range there. That's my dog's weight. Another thing to mention as well about is, we should always look at ideal weight when we are choosing the quantities and not at their current weight, but let's leave that on the side. But like, how accurate are these feeding instructions versus getting a nutritionist to work that out for your dog? Because as you said, every dog is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how accurate they are, they're not. And they could be 50% out. So on an individual basis, even if you've got a 20-kilo dog, you're feeding it to be a 20-kilo dog, it could still be 50% too much or 50% not enough for your dog. So I think this is where people get in the mud a little bit with feeding amounts and calculations, because all any of them ever do, whether you're going off the back of the bag, whether you've worked them out on an online calculator, a nutritionist has worked them out for your dog, it is only ever a starting point. And what happens is people get very fixated on that amount and then go, well, it's gone wrong, but I did it all right. I was feeding the right amount, but it's missing the point. And I think this is where the communication from a food production point of view is missing the trick, really, is to say you feed this amount to start with and you see what happens. If your dog's weight goes up, that is too much food. You need to reduce it. If your dog's weight goes down, then it's not enough food and you need to increase it until you keep the weight that you're looking for. And I think that message just hasn't got through at all. So when people say, well, how much should I feed? In many ways, you could just pick a number, because all you're looking for is a reasonable starting place. And then you adjust very much based on the response from your dog or cat. That's the only way to tell how much they should eat. So the back of the bag, it's for the average dog. It's going to get you something reasonable, but it's never going to be accurate for all of them.
Yeah. And of
or
course,
many
like,
of them.
yeah. And, like there is the back of the bag doesn't take in consideration for commercial food, whether your dog has been neutered, whether it hasn't, what, the exercise that they do. And another thing I think is, like, I would say a lot of dogs, I'm not going to say a percentage, but a lot of dogs nowadays, they live indoor. So, like even me looking at, the FEDIAF guidelines are like just very one or the other. They're not very specific. They're just low activity, high activity. So there are so many different factors that needs to be taken into consideration when working that out. Do you use a specific website to get an initial amount before then you tell you and go and watch the weight and then we adjust based on that?
So I personally do the calculations, because for weight loss, it's more accurate for me. If I was doing it for, a general patient who just wants a life stage diet, then going off the back of the bag is perfectly reasonable. The other place that I would go is UK Pet Foods online calorie calculator, because it allows you to adjust for activity level. So high, medium, and low, I think it is. I mean, there's a bit of, well, what is high, what is low, but at least we get to make some kind of adjustment there. And it also allows you to put in details of the food that you want to feed. And so that one's probably going to get you a lot nearer than just off the back of the bag. The problems come again, and there's not a good solution for this, and it's where it gets a bit technical, is where owners want to feed some wet and some dry food, for instance. So you've got two products. How do you navigate that? Do you just feed half of each? What if you don't want to feed half of each? And there's no kind of easy way of doing that. So at that point, then I'm working out total calories and, giving some to the wet food and the rest to the dry, and so on. But it's really difficult, and it's very, very hard for pet owners. The other difficulty is with the foods is the calorie contents on the packaging in this country, at least. They don't have to legally be there. And although it would help me out, because then I don't have to go and work it out, pet owners don't know how many calories their dogs need anyway. So having the calorie amount on the bag probably isn't that useful to them. It would only be for me and you, maybe. But we can do our calculations for that.
I totally agree, because what I see all the time, I tend to do a lot of research on social media with dog owners, like questions that dog owners ask and things like that. It's always like, I want to do a 50-50. Do I just split the amount of both? And I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's not good. But it's just like, it's a way of just, being able to, work with someone, work with a professional to just really being able to define, it starts with the calorie, it doesn't start with the amount of food, because a kibble might have 4,000 calories per kilo versus a gently cooked diet might have 1,000 something per kilo. So it's huge. Like the difference is huge.
And pet owners do that quite a lot. They will substitute kibble for chicken, for instance, not realizing that everything is different other than the physical weight, but they think it's the same. So they'll swap that out, and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. So I think there is a little bit of education, like it's really lucky in that, right? Because if I'm a dog owner and I want to go online and I want to do a 50-50, unless I speak to like a vet nutritionist or a vet, I mean, vets are normally able to calculate that for you. It's but it's not something that people will go to the vet for to ask normally, and so they're like, okay, let me Google it, and then Google has got all the different information, and that's when mistakes happen, and then dogs get fed the wrong amounts for years. So it's all about knowing and the education part, I think. So we have a dog overweight, we identified that, because another thing you mentioned is the VSAVA body condition score chart. I'm going to pop it on the screen when I edit this episode. But we do know that, between 4 and 5 is, ideally where you want to see your dog, scoring. From 6 onwards, that's when your dogs become overweight, and then up to 9 obese. So we have a dog that is either obese or overweight. What do we do then? So we identify that. What is the best step to take if I'm just feeding my dog, like let's say a commercial food right now?
Yeah, so the big thing that we need to do is firstly, I suppose, ascertain how overweight they are, whether it's just mild overweight or whether it's obesity or severe obesity that they have, because our strategies could potentially be different. If we have a dog with a body condition score of 6 out of 9, so that represents around 10% above their ideal weight, we can kind of do the simple things. So we can look at the food, we could maybe reduce the current diet by 10 in the short term. We could maybe switch them to a light diet, and again, in the short term, and feed them for the weight that they should be. So if it's a 20, let me do quick maths, 25 kilo dog, we want it to be 20, that would be perfectly reasonable to do that, cutting out treats and all extra foods, increasing their activity. That might be enough for that individual, but the studies show that after 8 weeks using that strategy, we start running into nutrient deficiencies, particularly some of the amino acids are then compromised if we do that for too long. So we can do it in the real short term for those that have mild amounts of overweight, and that might be enough. For everybody else, or for those that have done it for 8 weeks and it's not worked, they will need a specific weight loss food to do weight loss safely. And it's all about not doing weight loss at all costs, because yes, if you take their current diet and you keep cutting the calories, they will inevitably lose weight. Although they might eat you, they'll be so hungry. But they'll be hungry, but they'll also be nutrient deficient. And that's not what we're here to do. It's unethical of us to be recommending that strategy. So we need the right tool for the job, and that's the therapeutic weight loss diets. Now, there are 6 or 7 available in the UK at least, which we can choose from, whichever brand you tend to want to go with. It's perfectly fine by me as long as it is balanced for weight loss. And the differences with the therapeutic diets for weight loss versus a light diet or any of the other maintenance diets is the density of nutrients and the density of calories. So for an adult maintenance diet, they're formulated to deliver all the nutrients at the number of calories to keep the weight stable. The therapeutic weight loss diets are designed for weight loss, so they've got much fewer lower calories in them, but they're much more dense in nutrients. So their nutrient level per calorie is very different. And that's how we give the calorie restriction without compromising any of the nutrients. And that's the only safe way that we can get weight loss for our patients, as well as cutting out treats and extras, increasing activity if they can, and all that sort of stuff. But predominantly, if we get that food right, then we are onto a winner, and at least doing it safely. The other thing with those diets that is useful is that we've recognized for quite a while now that things like increased protein and fiber help in terms of the pet's experience through weight loss. And that again is really important, because if we've got high food seeking behaviors, that program or that plan, however good it might be, is not going to work because the owner can't withstand and sustain those changes. So we've got to manage hunger in some way whilst we're doing this. And we've also done some studies actually at the University of Liverpool looking at the kibble shape itself, and actually a different shaped kibble that increases chewing does reduce voluntary food intake, meaning that it is more satisfying if we can get them chewing and eating slower and consuming their food slower. So with any of the weight loss foods, getting them to eat slower is really important, as well as what you feed and how you feed. It is also about the timing of feeds. But I mean, this is a big topic. I could talk about this for a very long time, but those are predominantly the sort of strategies that we have for the weight loss portion of this journey. Now, there is, of course, a weight maintenance journey to have at the end of the weight loss for those that do get there. And we can talk about that separately if you want. But certainly from my point of view, the vast majority of those that need weight loss will have to use a therapeutic diet to do it safely.
Yeah. And what does a weight loss diet in terms of nutrients, how it's formulated? Is it like, because obviously the most common commercial options are from the big companies, right? That obviously they have a lot more research and studies and they do a lot more testing. What is it made of there? Is it just like additional fiber that makes the dog feel fuller? Or is it a specific how are these diets kind of like formulated to ensure that the dog is actually feeling like they're not starving all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're formulated to be higher in protein and higher in fiber because both of those things have shown to keep you fuller for longer. And actually, we kind of know this as humans as well. If we eat a high protein, high fiber meal, then that meal keeps us a lot fuller than if we eat something that's high fat, for instance, with very low fiber. We'll be hungry in half an hour after eating something like that. And the reason the fiber helps is not only does it create bulk, and our satiety hormones are triggered partly by the bulk and the stretch receptors in our stomach. So having a big meal is really helpful to us. It also slows the gastric emptying. So rather than the stomach being able to get all the food through very quickly, it has to work a lot harder to do that before it then moves it down the digestive system. And similarly with proteins, so proteins take more work for the body as such to break them down to be actually used as an energy source. Their predominant purpose in the diet is for structural repair and all the rest of the things that proteins are used for. And so energy is not generally one of them. So by increasing the amounts of protein, again, we get a slower release of energy throughout the day, something much more sustainable. The other thing with the fiber is from a pet owner's point of view, because we've always got to think about their experience, not just the pet owner, is that we get a much bigger feeding volume. No pet owner wants to feel like they're only putting 3 biscuits in the bottom of the dog's bowl. They want to give a big bowl full of food, and still get weight loss. But, through these diets, that's how we achieve it. And so the fiber, it is very, very useful to us. Even though in previous years it might have got a bit of a bad name, it is in this situation at least extremely useful. And weight loss without a high fiber diet is very, very hard on the pet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And another thing I see around all the time right now is, we do know that there is a lot more of a shift for dog owners wanting to choose more like gently cooked options of diets, like more kind of like fresher than kibble. There are some dog owners that are just like, I want to let my dog lose weight, but I want a little bit more of a less processed diet. Is it like, what is your recommendation on that? Because in my experience, I found that most of the gently cooked options on the market are incredibly high in fat and very low in fiber. They have a good amount of protein. So, how would you approach that from your experience? And is a gently cooked diet, something that you will go for to help a dog lose weight, or maybe it's an option for you to come back to once they've lost the weight?
Yeah, so currently we don't have a therapeutic sort of gently cooked diet that we could use, which means they're all not balanced correctly for weight loss. So from the off, I'm sort of saying to somebody, I'm really sorry, we just don't have an option for that. That's not to say that we couldn't find something more acceptable. And I think a lot of the sort of people, I guess, who prefer that type of diet, they don't like kibble because of the processed nature of kibble, because it doesn't look like, it doesn't grow on trees, does it? You can't find it outside. It sort of feels a little less natural. And so in those cases, I mostly will talk to owners about feeding wet food, because wet food is often a bit more acceptable. It looks a bit more like something that their dogs would like to eat because of the moisture content. And I guess it's a big conversation around prioritizing what is the aims. What does the pet owner want for their dog, and how do we compromise? How do we find a way through together so that everybody's happy? Because it's no good me saying, right, feed your dog X number of grams of kibble a day when they're just not into that at all, and it's their dog and it's their choice. And so I always want to explore with them how we can do that and what we can do. One of the things that does really help, and in fact it helps all my weight loss patients, is the addition of some fruits and vegetables in with whatever food we're feeding. And this feels good from a pet owner point of view. We get to give something fresh, we get to give something moist, but if we choose carefully, we can also give things that are very low in calories and have very little, if any, impact on the weight. So for those patients who their owners prefer a freshly or gently cooked diet, and any of the others, in all honesty, I'm talking about things like broccoli, cauliflower, green beans, sprouts, cabbage, cucumber, courgette, all of those things. Dogs pretty much, most of them will eat something off that list. And then
Yeah.
in terms of fruits, berries, fine, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, melon, all of those, again, they feel good from a pet owner point of view to be able to feed those. And so it's about trying to find those level of comfort where we can do the weight loss safely, but also allow that dog to eat things that they would like, but the owner to feel like they're giving things that are good in that way too.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it is good, isn't it? Because, at the end of the day, as long as 90% of their main food comes from a complete and balanced source, you still have
Yeah.
that 10% of calories intake. I feel like sometimes as well, it's like there are so many treats out there that you can buy. And some of them, like, that's kind of the education I'm trying to do. It's like dog owners don't realize, and I didn't as well at the time before getting into nutrition, that like you have a biscuit that can be that big versus like a tiny little like training tray. And like all of that makes up for calories. So if you roughly work out, okay, that my dog needs 30 calories a day from treats, then you can even work out, you know what, I'll make them a little homemade meal. That's roughly got this amount of calories. There you go. I'm going to add it as a topper. So they still get the benefits of like fresh, but also I know they're
Yeah.
still doing, they're still following that weight loss journey that they need to be following to get at their healthy weight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to work for everyone. And I think, yes, sort of setting aside a certain number of calories that can be fed in just about anything that's not going to impact, the nutrition. It's going to bring joy. It's going to maintain that relationship. That is just as important
Yes.
as the rest of it. And if we
Yeah.
discount that and don't think about it in our planning for weight loss, then again, we're setting ourselves up for failure. The problem with a lot of treats is a lot of them are labeled low fat. And during weight loss, owners assume that low fat means low calories. And again, because the calories aren't on the packet, they just don't know. And I can say squarely, it's not the case. Low fat is very rarely low calorie in dog treats, because to make them taste good, they have to add something, usually protein, and protein brings along calories just like carbohydrates do. So they won't be. Now, there are some exceptions, and we do have some functional treats now that go alongside the weight loss diets that are very, very low in calories. And those are wonderful because they come in a treat bag. They're highly palatable. They're balanced like the weight loss food is. I have been praying for these for years. So I'm so, so happy that they are now available. And my patients almost exclusively love them. I can't actually think of anyone who doesn't love them. I have them in my consulting room now. I didn't used to be able to give treats, but I can now because they're only 2 calories a
I
treat.
love
Brilliant.
it.
Everyone
Because
can have
really
one.
being in a weight loss clinic, you're just like,
Yeah,
actually, I need to be the tough one here.
exactly that. So, these have been really, really useful to me. And one of the things from a pet owner's point of view is they want to feel like it's special, like a treat is actually a treat. So,
Yeah.
the dog's got to look forward to having it. They've got to be excited about it. It's got to come in a nice rustly bag. All of these things add to that experience. But we do have some good options now, which is amazing.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And in terms of how much weight like is safe for a dog to lose, so I guess might be different from the overweight versus obese, like, or it might be the same. But what is the difference between, like, in terms of like week on week of what we should be expecting them to lose?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because what you'll find written in literature is quite different to the reality of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, in terms of safe weight loss, dogs can safely lose up to 3% of their body weight per week. None of them do, or they shouldn't, because that really is very, very tough on the dog. That's a heavy calorie restriction to get a rate of weight loss that high. In cats, as an aside, it's 2%. Anything over 0.5% per week, I consider to be fine. So as long as it's moving at around 2% per month, I'm perfectly happy with that. And so in literature, you will see 1 to 2% as the expected rate of weight loss for most weight loss diets. And that is true in colony studies. So where you have dogs in a controlled lab environment with no neighbors and, babies dropping food and chips at the park, that kind of thing. Great. If you have that control, then you can expect 1 to 2%. But we're talking about pets for the vast majority. And so although you might get 1 to 2% initially for our dogs that are owned by pet owners, that will absolutely slow as the compensatory mechanisms kick in through weight loss to try and hang on to that body fat. And so towards the end of weight loss, especially if they've had a lot to lose, it can be very, very slow. For me, though, I try not to concern myself about it at all. Weight loss is weight loss, and I'm happy. As long as it's moving in the right direction and has not ground to a halt, I don't tend to change very much. And even if there's been 1 week where there's not been a whole lot of weight loss, maybe they've only maintained, it's fine. See what it is in a couple of weeks' time, because often, well, I mean, almost always, weight loss is not linear. You will get some big drops and then some little ones. It is a bumpy journey. It's a sort of bumpy road to the ultimate goal. And sometimes there'll be hiccups. It'll be Christmas, or it'll be someone's birthday, or they go on holiday. They're just hiccups, though. They're bumps in the road, not, and they're very much expected. We just get back to it. Or after whatever the event is, we keep going. And they should resume their weight loss as they did before.
Yeah, it's a process, it's a journey, isn't it? It's like when as humans go to a nutritionist and we have a wedding and then we have a holiday and things like that. So that's really cute. I really like it though. It's just like, what are the most common breeds that you see in your clinic then, in terms of like that they need to lose weight? Give me like a few.
So I reckon if you polled the audience, they'd have Labrador at the top of their list. And yes, we do see quite a lot of Labradors. But actually, I see breeds that are popular. So 5-10 years ago, I was seeing a lot of pugs, brachycephalic breeds of all kinds, because they were so popular. Pugs in particular don't always move very much. They do have quite a desire for food often. So pugs, beagles. Nowadays, actually, with the kind of explosion in popularity of miniature dachshunds, we see a lot of sausage dogs, always in pairs as well, which amuses me. They all come in twos, but we see a lot.
Ones.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so we see a lot of those, but again, it's to do with popularity. We've had over the years, though, a really wide selection of breeds. There, some really unusual ones. We haven't had breeds, so whippets, greyhounds, salukis, those sort of sight hounds. We don't tend to get those. It's not that they don't get overweight, they definitely do, but just not in the same way and the frequency as some of the other breeds. And we know there is genetics that are playing a part here, which is why we see such prone breeds within those sort of Labradors, pugs, beagles, border collies, and so on. But there are no dog breeds that are going to be immune. It's just some are more likely than others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so interesting. Yeah. And I was wondering as well about cockapoos, because that's a breed I know really, really well. And I have worked with cockapoos. I had a dog hotel for years, and they were the culprits one normally to be overweight, because they are very picky with their food. And so the owners are just absolutely desperate to get them to eat. And so they will just end up adding anything to their food for them, like in terms of topping, like grated pâtés. I've seen it all. Pâté with onion inside. That this is the topper you need to add. But like they tend to be like the cheeky one, because they're like, we're not hungry. We're just very clever, showing you we're not hungry, so that you just give us the best of the best. And then,
Yeah, I see a lot of cockapoos too, and that is my experience also. My mum has 2 cockapoos, They are extremely clever, and I think people really underestimate how clever they actually are. They work out so early on that if they don't eat that, something better comes along, and owners just walk blindly into this trap that they set for them, and the dog's perfectly happy with this situation. A lot of the problem with very intelligent breeds like that is boredom. They don't have a good outlet for that intelligence, and so they focus it on food and they focus it on the owner. And that's what makes them difficult to feed. Dogs that are very busy, that have got a job, maybe they're agility dogs, gun dogs, or whatever, they come back and eat anything because it's food, they're hungry, and they have less energy to expend in going, actually, I'd like my grated cheese, please, Mum. And from a pet owner's point of view, just an animal lover, seeing your pet eat and enjoy their food is fundamental to whether we are okay or worried about our pets. So they are kind of leaning on that propensity that humans have to want to see things that they love eat well, and most of them, if they were put in a different situation, would eat pretty much anything eventually. I'm very sure. But yes, it all comes from a good place, but they are unfortunately almost cleverer than we are.
Yeah, they really are, honestly. I had this one, it was a Cavapoo actually, and he would never ever eat at home. Every time we used to come for boarding, a different dog. A different dog. And the owner is like, what are you doing to him? And it's just, for me, it was just getting him out and having a routine. It's like, food comes down at this time because I've got 5 dogs running around the house. I can't just leave food on the floor for you. And he knew as soon as he came, it's like, these are the feeding times. So that's when I need to eat. And he was just switching completely. And the owner was just like, you know, what's going on? They're just so clever, you know? And it's so interesting. Can you tell me your best success story that you had in your clinic?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. I have a board in my consulting room where I celebrate our weight loss successes. And we have had some spectacular ones, you know, way over 40% of body weight loss. And in terms of numbers,
wow,
you know, and the changes to their life, their health, you know, everything is just incredible. But I think although those are, you know, on paper, some of the best ones, I actually think it's about the little wins for me. It's the ones that come and they say, she can run up the stairs now, or she's playing again. She hasn't played for years. You know, those are the things that make me skip from the building, you know, saying I've got the best job in the world, because it's those little wins of bringing health and joy, I think, to our patients. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about any of the sort of 300-400 patients.
I can imagine, but it's all about, you know, it goes back to like, it's not how long your dog lives. It should all be around the quality of their life, especially as they get older, because, you know, it's nice that your dog lives up to like 18 or 20, but, you know, how are those last 10 years of the life being lived versus a dog that is super healthy, and then right at the end, you know, okay, something happens. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about seeing them happy, running right until the end without things like arthritis, and you know that you've done all the right things to prevent, you know, because they are going to get old whether you like it or not. And so it's
absolutely. We focus far more now on health span rather than lifespan, because as you say, living a long, painful life is not what anyone wants. You know, being healthy and fit and enjoying your life right up to the end, that's what we're after, however long that is likely to be. So particularly when I think about seniors, it's very much about that health span. How can we keep them as well as we can for as long as we can? And yes, aging is coming to us all. We can't stop it, you know, but we can slow it down. We can lessen the effects of it, and we can, you know, just make the very best opportunity for these dogs.
I love that. Absolutely love that. So before we close up, I wanted to say, if anyone is listening to this, is in the UK, and they, you know, loved chat and they would like to, you know, either reach out to you or work with you, how would they go about doing?
So you can find me on LinkedIn and send me a message if you want to, or you can find me on Instagram. So my name on Instagram is @thefatvetnurse.
Of course.
I kind of stole that name because my boss is the fat vet. So I thought I have to be the fat vet nurse.
Yeah.
But yes, you'll find me on Instagram again. You know, send me a message and I will get back to you.
Put all the links in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you for today's chat. I mean, I could talk with you for the next 10 hours for sure. I'm sure we might do like a P2 as well of this.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. No, I agree that I've got so much to say on all these topics, but it's because they're big and complex. So it's been
and
great.
it links back to like the love that we have for our dogs and cats, right? And our pets in general. So it's just really nice. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to DAFY, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.